Thanks for joining us today for this really important and timely conversation. And I just wanted to thank TheWrap for having us and seeing the importance of this conversation today. I was introduced. My name is Syrinthia Studer, and I'm proudly EVP of the board for Women in Film. Just quick note on my background. Most recently, I was Executive Vice President of International Productions and Republic Pictures at Paramount Pictures. Very happy to serve on the board. This type of conversation and dialogue is one that we have quite often at Women in Film, but to have it in a room with all of you is really important to make sure that we are advancing this dialogue. So let me introduce my amazing group of women here. First, I'd like to introduce, I'll start at the end. I'd like to introduce Stacy Smith. Stacy is the foremost disruptor of inequality in the entertainment industry. Dr. Smith, let me correct myself, is the founder and director of the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, which is the leading global think tank studying issues of inequality in entertainment. Your work is so important, so thank you. Welcome. I am also very excited to have Linda Yvette Chavez join us today on the panel. Linda is a celebrated director, writer, and showrunner. She's currently adapting the New York Times bestseller, I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, for Orion Pictures. She also penned the critically acclaimed film Flaming Hot. So excited to have her here with us today. Yet another celebrated and prolific writer and producer, Nicole Jefferson Asher. Most recently, her credits include creating the brilliant limited series Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. She also is co-EP of P-Valley for Stars. And she has done some incredible work on the steering committee of the Showrunners for Abortion Access, which we'll discuss on the panel today. So very, very happy to have her as part of this dialogue. And last but not least, Vicki Shabo. Did I pronounce your last name right, Vicki? Oh, sorry about that. Vicki is Senior Fellow for Gender Equality and founder and director of Entertainment Initiative, Better Life Lab at New America. As a policy strategist and coalition builder, Vicki has helped to win paid family and medical leave, paid sick time, equal pay, and pregnancy fairness policies across the U.S. She also founded and leads a project focused on helping to shape TV and film stories about gender, work, family, and care. Thank you, everyone. So important, and we have a lot to cover and not a lot of time. So I'm going to we'll sort of round robin with some individual questions, and feel free to chime in if any dialogue, we get the spirit for dialogue to build upon dialogue. So Stacy, let me start with you. The Annenberg Inclusion Initiative recently released an analysis of portrayals of different aspects of reproductive health, including menstruation, contraception, pregnancy, abortion, miscarriage, and infertility, and the 100 most popular films of 2023. I'm curious, please educate us here, and what were the key findings of this study, and how would you like to see these findings influence the work of content that is created in the industry?
Yeah, thank you for having me here, and Women in Film in particular. I know we have a long partner in the room, wherever Kirsten went. Back there. A couple of things. If we look across the top 100 films and we think about issues of reproductive health, there's quite a few startling problems, so I'm just going to point out a few. If we think about the topic at hand, abortion, out of 400 films, over 5,000 speaking characters. This is a lot of content. There were 4 portrayals. 3 were verbal references, and there was only 1 actual portrayal, which was still a verbal reference. In here, I'll quote exactly what it was about abortion in a horror film. Exorcist, Believer is what it took place. The reference was that the woman was being scraped out like a rotten pumpkin. 100 films. So this is the type of message that is being communicated, right, in this global enterprise of storytelling in movies, which is highly problematic. The second finding is that most reproductive health focuses on pregnancy, but we rarely see motherhood in film in particular. Television is different. The third most notable finding that I think is important to highlight is if we are going to have reproductive health in any of the categories that you talked about, no big surprise, women directors are the ones who are most likely, because the reference, of course, is to a male director, but women directors have a higher likelihood of having reproductive health in their storylines in a way that's really important. What my hope would be is that the industry would stop engaging in adventures and missing the point, understand who their audience is and what their audience wants, and how to meet in those liminal spaces and create stories that are relevant to Gen Z and to boomers, right? Across, like, people want to see granular, interesting, compelling stories about life. And that's not what we're seeing across the top 100 films. And it's not surprising that it's a loss in terms financially, because there's a lack of connection to the audience, not your content.
Yeah, no, there was a quote, I'm going to butcher it this morning, from one of the panels where she talked about like diversity and inclusion, that it really is about making, as a company, making yourself relevant, not some, something to stand on. It's about relevancy. And I think that's what you're highlighting, that it's like if the industry wants to be relevant, then they need to have authentic, true storytelling that represents all aspects of women's lives. Speaking of doing brilliant work in this space, Nicole, as a founding member of the Showrunners for Abortion Access, what do you feel is the responsibility of showrunners in depicting reproductive justice, if any? And what is the responsibility of showrunners in supporting and protecting reproductive rights for people in our industry, on set, et cetera?
Whew, okay. Well, I mean, I think that to address the creative part, right? We have a huge responsibility. I'll actually start with a story from the collective of showrunners we got together when Roe v. Wade was repealed. And we started talking about how few of us had actually done abortion storylines or reproductive justice storylines. And we really started, and these are like some of your favorite showrunners in the world. We started to unpack how much we're self-censoring ourselves, and how, those very special episodes of after school specials and just all of the shows that we grew up with, where, you couldn't say abortion and that wasn't an option, and you were supposed to have you were supposed to Papa Don't Preach and keep your baby. And how much, so for us as creators, as writers, driving the industry, for us to actually have to unpack that level of kind of low-key brainwashing, I guess, I think really speaks to how powerful storytelling is, how powerful narratives is, and how much it impacts our culture. I think that even given the fact that there are so many women in the industry, we still have such bad numbers in terms of this representation. And it's not for lack of trying. I mean, I also think that, it's not like we're going to be like, oh, we're going to go out and make some abortion storylines and, and just shove them into, it does have to be organic and integral to the story and the characters. But I do think that we all need to do a better job, because it impacts so much. It's so subtly. It's not even necessarily an overt thing. It's so subtle, but the more you just see, the lack of abortion, the easier it is to dismiss that. And so I think that it absolutely, and that's why 1,500 of us decided, as soon as Roe v. Wade was repealed, that we had to do something. So to speak to the other aspect in terms of what our responsibility is to the health and safety of our crews, the whole point of a showrunner is to deliver a show, right? And usually people think of that as just, on time and on budget and, and of good quality. But it also our responsibility also impacts, the health and safety of the crew, the morale of the crew. And, again, our collective started because we realized once it got repealed, like after we kind of were commiserating, we realized like, well, what would happen if somebody had an ectopic pregnancy or got raped or had, reproductive health issues where they needed hormones or, there's so many scenarios, let alone, had a miscarriage or any of the types of things where, women's lives and the lives of the unborn babies are at risk. There was nobody was stepping up to really, let's figure out what to do about this. As a matter of fact, most of the studios didn't want to talk about it, and we really, forced them. People who had big, sexy overall deals at each studio, we went in demanding at least some sort of protocols and paradigms, and we were able to at least get, some hotlines on the call sheet so people at least know that, like, if something goes down, if they don't feel comfortable going to a producer or the AD or anybody involved in the production, that they could at least call the hotline. We do have a report card on our Instagram. It's Hollywood for Abortion Access for the number 4, where you can look at where the different studios are in terms of their policies. Almost everybody has some sort of privacy and protocol, but they stop short of actually trying to defending women if they were persecuted or prosecuted for either seeking abortion care or helping someone else get abortion care, and certainly they stop short of actually committing to any kind of emergency services. But, the struggle continues. I think that building the awareness and just, again, it's our responsibility to make sure that our crews are safe and to know that they at least have some options.
Thank you for initiating that work. And I'm just curious, I would assume, given that it's a broad collective, that there were male allies central to that work.
Well,
I
mean,
not
keeping
central,
it real,
but
yeah. Not central.
Okay,
not central.
not central. Yeah, I pulled that back. I pulled that back.
No, I mean, it definitely, it started very just much, it's just started off as commiserating. And, then most of the founding members were, all of the founding members were women. And when we decided that we had to do something. And then we kind of got started, and then we actually reached out to men. They were very supportive financially, I'll say. Okay. But not necessarily in terms of the on the ground. But okay. Again, it was an awareness builder. It was just so many of them didn't even think about the fact that like this could be a problem on their set. So I feel like just bringing that awareness to so many of them was a big step.
Glad that they were at least open to being a part of this dialogue, which is great. And Linda, your work, you are known for such like authentic, culturally rich storytelling, whether it be from a YA perspective or familial perspective. As you think about narrative and what you write about, how is culture informing your stories about family and caregiving, which is also a big part of this dialogue, because we must talk about this conversation from the perspective of all aspects of women's lives, and we can't have that dialogue without talking about that important work of caregiving. Are there particularities in the Mexican American experience and these themes that you aim to show more of?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all Mexican Americans, but I think I want to preface that with that, but I do think that of those that I know, which are a lot, there is a lot of intergenerational familial bonds. A lot of times our households have multiple generations within them, and we are right now, not only I think in Mexican American households, but a lot of households, we have sandwich generations where we're taking care of not only our children, but our parents as well. Yeah, there's so much going on, and I think that something like Hentified, which you didn't mention, which was the series that I had on Netflix, where you saw where you saw a lot of family. You saw grandpa, you saw grandchildren, you saw aunts and uncles, you saw family all together taking care of each other. It's a very cultural thing to take care of our elders. Like if you put your elder in a nursing home, it's kind of like, you're crazy. Like, that's not something you do. It's seen as disrespectful in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. So there is a reason why people need nursing homes and need support. And I think it's so interesting because when Chandra reached out to me about this particular panel, I thought, well, how can I contribute? Like, I saw some of the other folks who were going to be on. I know Stacy personally. So I was like, I don't know what I can say. But what's interesting is that I've literally lived this in the past 2 years through my own medical things that I've been dealing with. I, about 2 years ago, found out that I had a gene that made me very high risk for breast and ovarian cancer. And so I went down the journey of seeing a lot of doctors and figuring out the best course of treatment for myself, which involved a bilateral mastectomy and also ovarian removal, which that hasn't happened yet. But because of that, there's also fertility things that come into play, and what are the resources there and all that. And in the midst of that, my aunt, who is was my godmother and just like a second mother to me, had a brain hemorrhage. Actually, right before Flaming Hot came out. And because of that, she was left mentally incapacitated. She had aphasia, physically very mobile, but mentally not fully able to remember things, forgetting, we couldn't leave her alone. So we had to kick into gear in terms of her care. And even though it was a full family kind of get in there and support, it was so an eye-opening experience to see how broken the system is in terms of getting care and support, even with family members who were caregivers, like my mother, my brother, my sister, myself even. I went from like Flaming Hot premieres to spending the nights with my aunt and helping her change and all of that because her care again, because as a family, yes, you could get nurses, but to find someone who was going to love your loved one and care for them the way that you did, especially a loved one who could easily leave a nursing home, which my aunt did on the first night at a nursing home. She was very, very mobile and very strong at 70, and they were not used to that. So that morning, she was out in the street. But it's terrifying. I can laugh about it now, but that morning, I knew I had to go do pitches and all these things, and to be able to manage, especially in an intergenerational family where I'm the one who is, the wealth is coming from me, if I could put it that way. And when I imagine families like my own who don't have a Linda Yvette Chavez to show up with a checkbook, and that, even with that, still needed to fill it in with all the family and everybody just going hard. Like, I can't imagine how difficult, how hard. And then you have children to take care of. And you have, my niece was there teaching her ABCs again, or my aunt, my 4-year-old niece. Like that, everybody was in on it. So I think when I think about families and parents, and this brings us to Mexican Daughter, where you have a storyline where there's a loss of a daughter, and there's a lot of mental health issues. There's parents who are caregivers who have to work around the clock to take care of the family. The second daughter gets left, her emotional state gets left kind of in the dust. So much of that, so many of those layers come up, and it's like, how are we supporting that? How do we make it easy? And it's not. The process of getting someone paid to caregive took 6 months, and it took my poor brother, like showing up and calling and making best friends with the ladies who work there to like, come on, can you just get her application through? Can you just, like, who has the time for that? Like, who can really show up repeatedly in that way? So I think that the inequities there, especially for low-income, working-class families, are deep, and they're difficult, and they're painful. And then, on top of that, add to it people's own conditions that they're dealing with and managing. So, so after I thought about it, I was like, I do have some things to say. So here I am saying them. So I think like all of that, and to Stacey's point, like my plan is to write a movie about my experience, and like that's why it's so important to have women behind the camera to, and I hope to direct that as my first film because it's been such a impactful journey. And I think that's not something that some dude is just going to be like, let me tell the story about like this. So it's so specific, like that only a woman could tell it. And to be able to invest in those stories is so vital.
Number one, thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of a quote I heard years ago where someone talked about how, think of a wheel that men live their lives on spokes of the wheel. So one spoke will be work, one spoke will be, family, whatever, and they can stay focused on that spoke. It's like, but women, we live our life at the axis. Everything touches, that whole wheel moves and spins because of how centered we are in spinning all those plates at the same time. So the fact that you found yourself spinning the plates relative to your career, your own health, and your family, but came out of it inspired and prepared to tell stories that will help others is beautiful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Vicki, thank you. Your initiative, Rescripting Gender, Work, Family, and Care, seeks to help shape and amplify content that gives visibility to the way that people experience reproductive health decisions in the context of their full lives, as well as care, as relative to their work and family responsibilities. What do we know about what's on screen now, what audiences themselves are experiencing, and what they want to see in terms of that full picture of their lives? And why does more holistic storytelling matter?
Small questions.
Indeed, but you're the one to help us break it down, so thank you.
I actually want to start with the what are people experiencing now, because I feel like Linda's story is America's story,
Yes.
is the country's story, right? And the fact that you were like, I don't have anything to say, and then you're like, but actually I have all these things to say about how I managed work and family and care and how there were no supports available, is part and parcel of what everybody is experiencing, and yet people aren't talking about in systemic ways. And so that's really the nexus, both of the policy work that I've done, but also the narratives that we need to tell so that these stories come out into the open, so that people feel seen and understood, and so that people who haven't yet experienced this start to feel empathy. And I feel like in this moment, in this country in particular, the storytelling that needs to happen about work and family, about caregiving, about reproductive health could not be more important, because people's lived experiences are not being shown on screen. We know, for example, in addition to Stacy's amazing study, we know that, for example, Gina Davis Institute has found that when children are part of stories, childcare only comes up about 20% of the time. Caregiving is shown on screen about 11% of the time. But they're 100% of the time relevant to more than half of the population. Up to 106 million people in the United States are providing care to a child or a loved one. Most of those people are working. 73 million children are living in families, most of whom have all adults that are working. And yet we are almost never seeing two working parents on screen trying to manage work and family, or a single parent trying to manage childcare or elder care. We almost never are seeing women who are both providing care but also being loving parents. We tend to see one or the other, but not both. The one where the woman is like the hard-charging, boss lady at work, but not providing care at home, sort of reinforces one set of stereotypes. And the depictions of women who are in homes, and maybe they have a job, but you never really hear about their job, reinforces the idea that women's work isn't very important. If you have children, but they're never seen on screen, where are they? Who's taking care of them? Are they being
That's my favorite.
Yeah. Are they being cared for well? Or is the person that is caring for them who you never see, that's invisibilizing care work, paid care work, which is so essential to everyone's ability to do other kinds of work. Are we seeing men? Often when men are shown on screen, they're either mannies or they're stay-at-home dads, who are more common, but not that common, or they're absent or abusive. That's another Gina Davis Institute study. And we know that depictions matter. We know, for example, from Norman Lear Center, This Is Us, had a big effect on how people were talking about and seeing care, and also how they feel about policy. So rescripting gender, work, family, and care is meant to bring these statistics into the light, but also to lift up really good stories. So High Potential, for example, on ABC has been talking about childcare. The Neighborhood just did a story about paternity leave. Mrs. Maisel, I wrote a whole op-ed about the last season of Mrs. Maisel and how she stepped into the light and sort of said, like, I provide care and I work and I need grace and I'm also doing a really good job. And so these are there are great examples out there. I feel like I know True Detective Night Country has been talked about today. Work and family was woven throughout that show in different ways. Both a younger man who wanted to be there for his family and was being held back, and also a mom who was dealing with lots of issues with her daughter. And those are the kinds of depictions that we need to see more of. And ideally, we need to think about how they connect to solutions. And so we did some research with MarketCast earlier this year, which shows that 84% of streaming viewers, avid streaming viewers, want to see more realistic depictions of their own lives on screen. And by the way, 55% of those streaming viewers are dealing with work and family issues and caregiving issues. Most of those streaming viewers have had financial or work consequences as a result of those issues. And they want to see more of these aspirational depictions of people looking for and finding childcare, looking for and finding paid leave, being in workplaces where people can speak with pride rather than apology about the caregiving that they're doing, and where people are feeling supported, and where their bosses and their colleagues are supporting them. And so that, I think, to me, connects to policy and why it matters. Because when we bring these issues into the light, when people see that their struggles are connected to other people's struggles, when they see culturally specific references, and we know, for example, Latinos have lower rates of access to paid sick days, lower rates of access to paid leave. Black women in particular are facing intersectional discrimination in workplaces. And when reproductive health is in the corner rather than in the center of women's lives, as it is in real life, we're really creating situations where people then feel more empowered to take action. And we have great examples also of women who haven't had childcare and they've gone and made change in their communities. A care worker who had to go care for her son and was fired and was one of the protagonists in the fight for paid family and medical leave in Colorado. So there's real life stories out there, both of struggle and of hope, and that is what Rescripting Gender, Work, Family, and Care is about. And there's also handouts in the back for folks who want them for a lot of the stats that I mentioned, the market research, some of the good examples, and we're just really eager to really work with anybody that wants to dig deeper into the stories that maybe you don't think about as being part of authentic representation.
Thank you so much. I myself live in one of those sandwiched homes. I care for my father with Alzheimer's, and I have a 12-year-old son and a husband and a golden doodle. So I think I'm doing all right. I think I'm doing okay. Stacy, sadly, as evidence from this recent election, we saw. There's so much analysis that's attempting to happen, like what went wrong or what didn't move the needle. And one of those things that apparently did not move the needle was celebrity endorsements of progressive policies. Do you agree that culture needs to change first before policy can change? And then just adding to that question relative to the celebrity endorsements, like, is there a different approach to that dialogue of culture creators, if we want to put some of those, talent in that perspective, a different approach that could be utilized to lead to improved policy and culture?
So I get the easy question. That's basically what's happening. Let me unpack this in a couple of different ways quickly, because I also want to hear from the panelists. But we did actually a study with Kirsten and Women in Film under the Reframe banner. And so I want to address the first issue. Hollywood is spending a lot of money, and A-listers don't sell in film. So it's not associated with box office performance domestically or internationally. We have the most sophisticated economic models. And matter of fact, if I took them to Wall Street, we would make a lot of money. But antithetically to my career, I can't do that, right? But I think it's really important to understand that the business model that's driving film isn't one that actually is interested in being revenue generating. Because if you're spending all of this money on above the line talent, in particular actors with the first name Chris or Emma or whomever, right? Like that money is not correlated with return on investment. It's production costs, marketing dollars, distribution density in the US and internationally. So the first part of your question is the business model's wrong. They comp films based on real estate. That's not how you should comp films. I mean, we have access to hundreds of movies. If somebody wants to come and say, hey, how should I comp this? We'll tell you what market forces should be behind a film. Matter of fact, you should do that. Please do that. Because we'd love to work with you. Secondly, the culture policy thing. Look, I never speak out of my area of expertise. I just think that's academic malpractice. But what I will tell you is let's look to marriage equality. And marriage equality was really clear. One of the major factors that move the needle is shows like Will and Grace were broadcast into homes across the country with a large proportion of the population, right? This was how many years ago? People didn't have anyone in their friend group or their work group, right? Their community group that was LGBTQ+. No one. And by watching that show, they shifted attitudes, perceptions, and beliefs, right? And then that made way with The Ellen Show, with Glee, right? These really important storylines. So no one can tell me that stories don't matter. And had the industry listened to our research back in 2008, back in 2009, we would be in a different place today because those same stories can transport and transform the audience. And we need that for culture to work on policy and vice versa. And one of the areas that that's horribly abysmal, and we were talking about this before, it's trans representation. Out of the top 100 films last year, there was not one portrayal. And if you sum up all the minutes over the last since 2014, it clocks to about 3 minutes on screen over 700 movies of trans representation. That's an indictment, and that's on people's consciences that they have contributed, yes, all of the horrible political ads as well, but storytellers play a role. And so it's really important to be thinking about data, both, kind of the big picture, bird's eye view of the entire industry, and then what someone like these storytellers can do when they're really impassioned and want to tell a personal story. It can make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. 338 million people in the United States. If 3% of the audience is changed by a story, that's a huge proportion of the audience. And that's how we need to be thinking about some of these issues. It can transform huge swaths of people very, very quickly.
Thank you. I'm just curious, Linda or Nicole, if that topic, of culture needing to change, before policy can, is that something that in your rooms and in the work that you do that you does it come forward for you in the work that you do? I'm going to take this moment that I have with this piece of content to shift culture. Is it a purposeful commitment to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think that just my presence and just your presence in this industry, and even telling stories or even telling their stories from our point of view is, I think, hugely important. But I mean, I became a filmmaker because I wanted to tell the stories that have been silenced for over 150 years of cinema history. That's particularly why I do a lot of biopics and true life stories and historical fiction, and because I didn't learn about Madam C.J. Walker in school. And the few things that I did know about her actually were untrue. She didn't actually invent the hot comb. So things like, I worked on The First Lady. I learned so much about, America from just doing that project. I think, and I think as we're headed into, this misinformation era, yes, and we can't trust the news, and there is no news, and we're not going to have a Department of Education soon. I think it becomes really important to to incorporate, and again, it's not necessarily, I'm also not like trying to make like spinach movies or like scolding, I think, again, there's a big discrepancy between educational movies and movies that are reflecting our lives. And as we've realized that we're still missing the mark a little bit, and there's a lot of work to be done, so which is exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, I think for me, I've just always loved my people. Like, I love my community deeply. I think since I've been a kid, I've always like observed them and been in love and like wanted to show the world who they are, because it's almost like when you have this really amazing kid and you're like, look at my kid, they're awesome. That's how I feel about my community. I've always felt that way about them. And I think for me, everything that I write, everything that I work on is a love letter. It is me saying, like, I love you. And if the world gets the privilege of seeing it and love them the way that I do, then thank God, because that's the reality. And I think that oftentimes, again, the reason why we have to tell those stories from within our community is because, like, someone can't learn my experience that I've had for my entire life, for decades, with the people that I love. Like, I love them enough to show you their flaws. I love you enough to show you that they're three-dimensional. I love them enough to say, like, to call them out, because that's how I call out my parents or my cousins or whoever. I want to love them enough so that the world can see them in their full beauty as human beings. And I think in that process, you get that authenticity, you get to change the world, hopefully. Hopefully that's a special byproduct of what I do. I've just, gone through it now enough to not put all my eggs into the basket of, like, changing the world, just because the pressure, the responsibility is pretty heavy. But what I have learned is that if I go through my work with that love at the center, then at least I can hold on to that love no matter what happens to the project or anything. It's like, well, I love them, and I showed the world that love, and that's enough for me. And even if it's a small portion of the population that gets changed, even if it's my own community who sees themselves, which is something that I get repeatedly in messages and in conversations and in encounters with people, that's been enough for me, So, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in particular in this time where people are getting news from really different sources, where people are tuning out news because it's too hard, where people are sort of in their camps, and where we've just come through and are in a very divisive time that is increasingly fact-free, I think it is story that brings people together. And it will become increasingly important to see stories of people who are being denigrated in other realms, and important in ways that bring us together and create love and create understanding. And so I think this work couldn't be more important at this time, to both correct some of the misinformation that's out there, but really to just bring connection at a time where people are feeling very disconnected and scared and misunderstood and misrepresented.
Yeah, and I'm very prayerful that we don't walk back the progress that has been made with telling, deeply representative stories. I mean, for so long, our industry was defined by, stories that were told from a white cis male gaze, and those stories were relatable. We enjoyed them, but they were missing real connection, to broader, kind of what we talked about again this morning, relevancy. So I'm hopeful as well that at least that it's a little bit of our counter exercise, right, to what's happening in culture.
Can I just say one other
Yeah,
thing? Because I
please.
think, and I have referenced politics being so divided. I just want to call out, and because I think there's a real risk of fear in telling some of these stories in this moment, I want to call out that actually Alaska, Missouri, and Nebraska passed paid sick days laws guaranteeing workers the right to earn paid sick days. These are states that voted overwhelmingly for a candidate that didn't stand for those things, but voted for worker protections. Some of these states also voted for abortion protections. Some of these states also voted to invest in childcare. And so these issues are not controversial at a time where they are controversial, obviously, but like they're not controversial down political lines in the ways that we often think, and that's another reason or data point why the storytelling that can happen is so important.
Thank you, I agree. Just a question for all of you. How would you each describe the landscape of your work at this moment? So what you're currently working on and or, your future forward focus. And are there new specific focal points or perspectives on the work that you're doing that storytelling and or storytellers can do?
For us, I think we're just here to provide facts and information that help to make stories more real and to reassure storytellers and executives and decision makers that these stories are human, that audiences want to see them. There's a huge audience engagement upside to this. And to really use storytelling to bring connection that helps to scaffold some of the community and cultural and policy changes that we ultimately want to see. And to tell stories of agency.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't know. I'm still, trying to make the things that I'm trying to make and to varying degrees of success. I guess the thing that I would impart to everyone in this room is that to remind everyone it's Giving Tuesday. And all of the abortion rights, all of so many of these organizations that are doing really important work need our help and support more than ever. So I'm really thinking about that and how to play a greater part in that. Thinking about how to mentor and how to help other people find their voices and get their voices out there and just kind of bracing for what's coming.
Gosh, I already described a few things earlier that I'm working on, but I think right now what's interesting is since the election, I've just heard a lot of horror stories of folks and storytellers and writers, women and women of color in particular. And the fear is around whether or not our stories are going to be told anymore, which is fascinating because at the same time we have a film like Wicked with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande at the center, and then Moana 2 who has a Polynesian young girl at the center, and it's interesting because I think that Stacy said, sometimes we just as a country, as a world, we hear things and we go, oh, it's all horrible or it's all going in that direction. And I feel like the industry sometimes does that too, even though there's tons of research and things to show you no, it's okay. We don't have to have 20 Taylor Sheridan shows. A couple's good, cool. So, folks being worried about that. And I think a lot of the work right now is one, self-care for a lot of storytellers and for folks who are telling these stories and supporting people who are telling these stories like that. It's, executives, managers, it's not just the storytellers, everybody involved with those folks, right? It's letting them have the space to have those feelings, but then how do we rebuild confidence and trust and belief? And how to, especially after so many years of, a lot of people have lost the fight, the fight inside of them. It's been hard. It's been really hard. So a lot of folks are I'm just gonna get a massage and wait 4 years and hopefully, life will be okay after it's all over. But the reality is we have to keep going, but how do we take care of ourselves? And I think that's something leaning into activists, and I'm friends with many activists who have done that type of work. And I think many of us storytellers were activists in our storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. So having roots in that myself, it's so much of the work is self-care. So much of the work is taking care of yourself and making sure that your heart and your soul are good, and that you have the support to do that. And a lot of the work that I lean into now that I'm starting to lean to is to exhibit that balance that we all need in life, that it's not about killing ourselves to make the world better. It's how can I make myself better, my own local family, community better, and not kill myself in the process, I hope. But yeah, so I just think rebuilding storytellers and helping them get through the muck of what's just happened and say, okay, we're gonna do this, it's gonna be okay. I hope. I keep saying I think. I don't know, guys. I'm normally more confident. I'm a little tired.
I think it's a great question. But first, I just wanted to comment, wherever you guys go, you are so infectious in terms of your culture and wanting to be part of your in-group. You, Eva, Annie, Gloria. It's amazing when you folks show up. It's joyful and it's a celebration. And so I just want to put that plug in about how much you love your community. It's contagious. So for us, what you'll be seeing out of the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative are a few different things. One is that we need more specific information about groups. So you're going to be seeing rapid fire, really extensive, detailed reports about different identity groups, because different identity groups will need different things. We're going to be launching a big Latino lab that we're super excited about, that will be led by Ariana Case in our think tank. You'll be seeing a big focus on audience-based work, because the industry, I have access to Gen Z. I'm a professor and I teach Gen Z. I think they're amazing. And the industry doesn't understand Gen Z. So we're going to be putting out briefs and working, and anyone, if you're interested in those and working with us, it's going to be really important to helping. I have no idea what's going on behind me. If it's the end of the world, could be the end of the world, right? What's happening? Yeah. So work on Gen Z, more economic analyses, more issues on mental health, because mental health, and whether it's in storytelling, whether it's in production, whether it's in music, right, and what people in music are experiencing, you'll be seeing a lot of that from us. And, we love to partner with people. I'm now creating content with Coco Francini and Kate Blanchett, and that's been an absolute blast. So if you see my name on a film, don't be surprised, because those days might be coming too, in terms of, we love giving money to people and putting it in the hands, because what Linda did is amazing. She opened with a story, the ability for Eva to direct, so that Eva can keep directing. So we need her to keep writing. And so the degree to which my inclusion initiative can get resources to storytellers, that's amazing, to give away money from other people. So that's something else that we'll be doing, just being a conduit to take money from here and get it over there, so that people can do what they're passionate about.
Well, I have to say, I came into this conversation, it was kind of a slightly heavy topic, right, relative to, I think, what we've gone through the past couple of months, but I feel very hopeful knowing that all of you, and I'll put myself in the same camp, right, and doing this work and staying committed will make for real change. So thank you for your honesty and for sharing. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. I'm sorry we did not have time for questions, but I think it was a great dialogue and we didn't miss out. Thanks.